Here is a fact that should genuinely bother you. For thousands of years, Western law assumed that every child had exactly one biological father. Courts were built around it. Religions were organized around it. Entire legal systems of inheritance, property, and legitimacy rested on it as if it were obvious, natural, and true. It was never proven. Not once. It was a guess, a cultural assumption so deeply held that nobody thought to question it. Until the late 19th century, there was no scientific way to prove which man fathered which child. It was folk wisdom dressed up as fact. And right now, deep in the Amazon rainforest, there are societies that never made that assumption at all. They looked at the same biological reality and built something completely different. And in one of those societies, researchers found that children with multiple acknowledged fathers survived at significantly higher rates than children with only one. So the question isn't just whether they were wrong, the question is whether we were right. Picture a camp somewhere in the ancient world. 30 people, maybe a few more, the same faces every morning, the same fire every night, the same voices you have heard your entire life. A woman gives birth. The whole camp gathers. There is relief, exhaustion, the particular joy that has looked exactly the same across every human culture for hundreds of thousands of years. But nobody asks who the father is. Nobody thinks to. The question doesn't exist here. Now step inside that world for a moment. You are one of the men in this camp. You have lived here your whole life. You know this child's mother. You know the people who will help raise him. The child belongs to this place, to these people, to this web of obligation that has kept everyone alive through drought and cold and illness. The idea that biology alone should define your relationship to this child has never occurred to anyone here. The child is here. The child needs feeding. That is the only thing that matters. And for most of human history, that was enough. In 1929, a Polish anthropologist named Bronisław Malinowski was living with the Trobriand Islanders of Papua New Guinea when he encountered something that stopped him cold. The Trobrianders had a complete, sincerely held explanation for how pregnancy worked. An ancestral spirit called a Baloma traveled from the island of the dead, became an embryo, and entered a woman's body while she was sleeping near the water. The spirit chose the woman. The spirit created the child. Sex had nothing to do with it. Malinowski pushed back. He tested the belief from different angles, looked for signs that this was mythology they maintained for outsiders while privately understanding the biological reality. What he found instead was genuine certainty. This wasn't folklore. It was the foundation of family, responsibility, and belonging, consistently held, passed down across generations, built into the entire structure of how they understood children and kinship and what it meant to bring a life into the world. An entire society of thousands of people had constructed a complete framework for human life with no concept of biological paternity anywhere inside it. They were not alone. William Crocker, an anthropologist at the Smithsonian, spent years documenting the Canela people of Amazonian Brazil. The Canela believed that it takes many acts of insemination from several different men to build a baby, that a child is literally constructed from the contributions of multiple fathers, each of whom carries a real, ongoing obligation to the child they helped create. This wasn't symbolic. This wasn't metaphorical. It was their sincere biological understanding of how human life begins. Stephen Beckerman at Penn State University spent years studying the Barí people of Venezuela, who hold a nearly identical belief. He tracked 897 pregnancies across 74 women and measured something nobody had thought to measure before, whether having multiple acknowledged fathers actually changed outcomes for children. Children with one primary father and at least one secondary father survived to age 15 at a rate of 80%. Children acknowledged by only one father survived at 64%. 16 percentage points, published in Current Anthropology in 1998. The reason was straightforward. More acknowledged fathers meant more men with a real obligation to provide food, particularly protein, during the years when it mattered most. The cultural belief created a network of investment around each child that a single-father system simply couldn't replicate. Multiple fathers wasn't a moral failure. It was a solution, one that worked measurably for the children born inside it. So what ended it? Not because humans suddenly understood biology better, not a philosopher, not a sudden revelation, not a religious decree, cattle. Researchers Claire Janaki Holden and Ruth Mace used a linguistic analysis of 68 Bantu languages to trace exactly when and why societies shifted from matrilineal to patrilineal kinship, from tracing descent through mothers to tracing it through fathers. The pattern was consistent across every case they studied. The accumulation of cattle-based wealth came first. The kinship shift followed closely behind. Think about what that actually felt like for the people living through it. You are a man in a community that has recently acquired large herds of cattle. Over years and decades, you have built something real. Animals, land, the kind of wealth that can be passed down and protect your children from hunger in ways that were never possible before. And then a question forms in your mind that would have been completely meaningless to your grandfather. When I am gone, who inherits this? And to answer that, you first have to answer something else. Whose child is actually mine? For the first time in human history, that question had economic consequences serious enough to reorganize society around finding the answer. Once that question had stakes, everything downstream changed to answer it. A 2012 study published in PNAS confirmed what historians had long observed, that religious practices controlling female sexuality were consistently more successful at promoting paternity certainty than those that didn't. The relationship between religion and female sexuality wasn't primarily spiritual, it was functional. Marriage, virginity, legitimacy, inheritance. Entire institutions formed around one goal: paternity certainty. Every rule, every prohibition, every norm about who women could be with and when and under what conditions traced back to one need: the need of men with property to know which children were theirs. In 1984, for the first time in the entire history of our species, the answer became provable. A question that shaped civilizations suddenly became a laboratory test. DNA fingerprinting gave courts and individuals a method so precise it could resolve with certainty what 500,000 years of human civilization had been organized around managing without ever actually solving. We didn't celebrate it, we barely acknowledged what it meant. But consider what it actually was. Every inheritance law designed to protect a man's biological line. Every religious system built to regulate female sexuality in service of certainty. All of it was infrastructure, elaborate civilization-scale infrastructure, built around an uncertainty that in 1984 simply ceased to exist. The bar didn't build that infrastructure. They built something else instead: a web of shared obligation, multiple acknowledged fathers, a community organized around the survival of children rather than the certainty of paternity. And their children survived at 80%. There were people in the ancient world who looked at the same biological reality we have always lived with and asked a completely different question. Not whose child is this, but who is responsible for this child. Those are not the same question. They have never been the same question. We chose one. We built the entire modern world around it. And we have lived so long inside that world that most of us have never noticed we made a choice at all.